Hey, welcome, folks, to this edition of the 700 Club. Hey, did you ever hear about vaping? Vaping. Well, America's youth are getting hooked on vaping. It's an epidemic that's sweeping the nation. Dozens of teens rush to the hospital with a malady of health issues, including seizures and chest pains. Some are winding up in the ICU with severe lung damage. And they're all one thing in common. Vaping with what I call e-cigarettes. CBN's medical reporter, Laurie Johnson, has more.
Electronic cigarettes burst onto the scene about 10 years ago and quickly became so popular among young people, the Surgeon General calls teen vaping an epidemic. Users suck on a mouthpiece, which heats liquid nicotine into a vapor that is inhaled. Initially, manufacturers claimed e-cigs would help adults quit smoking. The bigger result, however, teenagers, many of them non-smokers, picked up the vaping, enticed by sweetly flavored nicotine like Berry Burst in bright packaging resembling candy wrappers.
Vaping in teenagers is something that is causing harm to our kids, and we want that message to be loud and clear.
Since e-cigs are relatively new, little is known about their long-term impact, particularly on youngsters. Health officials, though, are sounding alarms about a spike in breathing problems and lung damage among teens after vaping. 4 cases in Minnesota, up to 12 in Wisconsin, 6 in Illinois, and at least 1 in Florida. Chance Amarata rushed to the hospital with a collapsed lung.
It felt like I was having a heart attack, and it was insanely scary.
Chance says his doctors told him he had a condition made worse by vaping. Now on Instagram, he declares nicotine is rotting our brains and destroying our bodies, adding how many more kids are going to have to get hospitalized for us to stop. Another teen, Dylan Nelson, was placed in a medically induced coma after vaping, according to his brother.
Trauma that he's caused to his lungs is significant.
While doctors can't confirm it yet, they believe these acute, aggressive lung injuries appear to be caused by e-cigs.
We recognize that it is not a result of infection, like viruses or bacteria. It looks more similar to injury from an inhalation of some kind of a caustic substance. The body is actually reacting to something that's been exposed to or deposited along the lining of the lung.
Isn't that shocking? Well, CBN medical reporter Laurie Johnson is joining us right now. Laurie, how many teens are involved in this thing?
Well, recent studies, polls show about 5% of teenagers, that's about 1 in 20, who admitted it, Pat.
What is the deal? They're getting nicotine, except it's through a pipe instead of through a cigarette?
That's right. This is an e-cigarette, and see how easy it is to hide. So parents, be on the lookout for a little contraption like this. A lot of folks have never seen it. And then this is the liquid nicotine that you put into this. And this little contraption here cost $40, believe it or not. And it was the cheapest one they had at the store. They had them for $75. This liquid nicotine costs $20. And it's very sweet. And to answer your question, what's the appeal? It's extremely delicious. It's very sweet, and it's very good. It tastes a lot like candy, and there's a little bit of nicotine in it, so there's a little bit of a kick to it as well. That's why the kids like it.
Well, how come this stuff is so dangerous?
Well, it's really interesting because, remember, for so long we were wondering about cigarettes. Are they dangerous? They seem like they might be. And then years later it was proven. I think we're on that same path now with these e-cigs. What we're seeing now, there's a new research done by Duke University and also Yale that was just completed last year that showed the chemicals in this liquid nicotine, the propylene glycol, and the flavorings, especially when you heat them and vaporize them, can cause serious lung damage and damage to the airways. Now, we know that the propylene glycol and the flavorings are in our processed foods, but our gut can handle them better than our lungs and our airways, because our lungs and our airways are so much more tender. Our gut is a little bit tougher and can handle these substances. Also, with teenagers, their bodies are not fully developed yet. Their lungs and their airways really don't become fully developed until they're in their 20s. So they are particularly at risk. And now, in addition to the CDC looking at this, the FDA is looking at the links between seizures and e-cigs. So I think we're going to be hearing a lot about this in the years to come.
Laurie, are we looking at permanent damage? These people can actually, they're risking death with this stuff?
Well, that's a great question, and that's the big unknown, because there isn't very much research done on these e-cigarettes and the liquid nicotine that you put in them. And so we're going to be seeing that, what type of short-term as well as long-term effects, we just don't know.
Laurie, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, isn't it amazing the things that are conceived of that will destroy the young people of America? Well, in other news, the White House says it's not concerned about a recession, but that's not stopping the president from calling for action by the Fed, which I think is insanity. Why, with interest rates at historic lows, we want to push it down? It'd get to be zero. There's only so much room the Fed has got. John Jessup has more.
That is right, Pat. President Trump insists the economy is strong, but he says it could be stronger, and he's criticizing his own Fed chairman, Jerome Powell.
We're doing tremendously well. Our consumers are rich. I gave a tremendous tax cut, and they're loaded up with money. I think I could be helped out by the Fed, but the Fed doesn't like helping me too much.
In a tweet Monday, he called on the Fed to lower interest rates by a full point. A survey by the National Association for Business Economics shows 75% of economists believe there will be a recession by 2021. And White House officials are discussing further action to spur the economy, including early-stage talks about a cut in the payroll tax to help the middle class. Well, Planned Parenthood is withdrawing from a federal family planning program that funds health services for women. That move is in response to a new Trump administration rule which says clinics that refer or perform abortions can't receive the funds. As CBN's Heather Sells reports, pro-lifers are praising the new rule and say it reveals the truth about Planned Parenthood's real goals.
Planned Parenthood is rejecting $60 million in Title X funds so that it can continue to refer women for abortions. Pro-life advocates are calling it a win.
They don't really care if they receive Title X money because their primary focus is not women's health care. Their primary focus is abortion.
It shows that their narrative claiming that they mainly provide healthcare-related services is just simply false.
Planned Parenthood pulled out because of a new Trump administration rule that bars taxpayer dollars to groups that counsel or refer women for abortion. Pro-lifers say it's a promise kept by the Trump administration.
Especially going into the 2020 election, Christians can be very encouraged that President Trump is keeping his promises to defund Planned Parenthood.
Planned Parenthood is the country's largest abortion provider, and its interim CEO predicted Monday that the loss of Title X funds would cause many low-income women who depend on Planned Parenthood services to delay or go without care. But pro-life advocates note that Planned Parenthood will still receive a big chunk of federal funding via Medicaid. Last year, it was $500 million. Researchers say those Medicaid dollars encourage low-income women to get abortions.
Essentially, when the price of abortion goes down, the incidence increases. And if low-income women can get abortions subsidized through Medicaid programs, they're more likely to get abortions.
Pro-lifers also believe that the loss of $60 million in Title X funding will have minimal impact. Heritage's Melanie Israel says Planned Parenthood reported close to $250 million in excess revenue last year and can afford to lose the funds. Many pro-life activists believe Planned Parenthood's decision to forego Title X funding shows its true colors by putting abortion over family planning. The organization recently ousted its CEO, Dr. Leanna Wen, who promoted comprehensive health care for women over straight-up abortion advocacy. The Trump administration is also moving to cut abortion funding overseas. CBN's David Brody exclusively reported Monday that the White House plans to drop family planning money in West Africa.
The administration says it has discovered that some West African countries are evading the Mexico City policy. It requires non-government organizations to agree to not actively promote abortion. Heather Sells, CBN News.
Thanks, Heather. Pat, back to you.
You know, you go back at the founding of Planned Parenthood, there was a lady named Margaret Sangster who was really way out. I mean, way out. If you read what she said, she believed in eugenics, and I read a monograph she wrote called Breeding the Thoroughbred, and she claimed that black people were inferior, that Southern Europeans were inferior. She thought, as a matter of fact, that certain Catholics were inferior, and certain, as I say, of course, the people from Africa were inferior. And so who did they give the Margaret Sanger Award to? They wanted to get a black man to be the spokesperson, or to be the poster boy, if you will, of Planned Parenthood. So they gave the Margaret Sanger Award to Martin Luther King. And that's the way it was, but it was the whole idea of sterilizing black people, sterilizing Southern European people, sterilizing those that Margaret Sanger felt were unfit, breeding the thoroughbred. It was totally eugenics. As a matter of fact, the Nazis probably picked up some of her statement. I thought that she had copied the Nazis instead of the Nazis copied her. Now, this is the organization that is getting probably $500 million a year of taxpayer money through Medicaid. And this idea of defunding a portion of it, that's a good first step, but that's all it is a first step. But this is not a health care issue. These are not women's health they're concerned about, and they finally have unmasked themselves. This is probably for all of us is a good thing that now the American people in the world can figure out who they really are. They are not interested in women's health care. They're interested in, quote, breeding the thoroughbred and eliminating the unfit. John?
Pat, concerns over a renewed arms race this morning as the United States tests a new weapon Monday, launching a modified version of the Navy's Tomahawk cruise missile. It flew more than 310 miles off the coast of California and struck its target with a conventional warhead. The test comes after the United States withdrew from the 1987 INF treaty earlier this month, which banned intermediate-range nuclear missiles. The Tomahawk has a range of more than 600 miles, which would have been in violation of the treaty. Earlier this month, the Russian weapons test resulted in an explosion and the deaths of 7 people. And Pat, it is widely suspected the Russians were testing a nuclear-powered missile.
Exactly. Well, the U.S. is saying, look, we can do it too. You can do it. We can do it. The Russian missile was to have a much longer range and supposed to be faster or supersonic at one time, but then later they said, no, it's more conventional. But nevertheless, we have the ability. The fact that Tomahawk flew hundreds of miles and hit right on target is an important thing. But that can carry missiles. They can carry nuclear weapons in the Tomahawk. And the American is saying, okay, guys, we can do it too. And my hat's off to the research, to the Defense Department. Congratulations, guys. You did a winner.